Beyond Reasonable Doubt was interesting because it was, I suppose, the first time we ever had sort of famous actors, you know, and we had David Hemmings and John Hargraves, and it was an absolutely wonderful experience working with these people. It was actually one of those things where, in fact, it reinforces my view that most directors' best films are their first films, you know, and it was John Lang's first film. And, you know, working with those actors and things who are so professional, you just go, this is wonderful, easy. You know, they know exactly what your job is, and they try and help you and teach you what their job is. And so once again, you see, it's the whole point of learning from someone else, so suddenly it rounds you out more and more. It was sort of, in a way, my first foray into really producing, I suppose, to the degree that I was actually taking a risk. And it was, you know, I mean, I have to say, it took up a good year of my life, not exclusively, but, you know, I was on it for well over a year. And as well as that, my ex-wife was the makeup and wardrobe person. So, you know, and I drove my vehicle was a props holder and a police car towing the makeup and wardrobe caravan, you know. So it was a very different time, and I still wonder why we can't still make films like that. But of course, the real success of it was that we actually got 3 times our money back, our investment back, out of the New Zealand release alone. You know, so it was a very successful foray into my first sort of real investing in film. We actually drove from Kaitaia to Invercargill, and every day, so we'd shoot for whatever, 12 hours until it got dark, and then we still had 100 miles to drive to the next motel that we were staying in, which is the next location, you know, so it was fairly full on. And anybody that says that it was an enjoyable shooting pork pie wasn't on pork pie. And for me as a sound recordist, there was always noise, you know, there was lots of noise problems, you know, and so from that point of view, from the location point of view, it was really tough. From the other side of it, during the post-production, I mean, you know, we worked on the film, and it got better and better all the time. I mean, we actually did finish a version of the film, and then Jeff went off and he did Ned Kelly as a special effects person. He came back and we all looked at it again, and we decided to do some recutting, and then we remixed it, and we got a much better mix. I was very proud of the mix, actually. I mean, that was the one of the pinnacles of my sound career, in fact, you know. It was the best mono mix I've ever done. I'd worked out a whole lot of things that we could improve to get loud noises and to get gunshots and things, and how to get them onto the screen, you know. And Jeff and I put a lot of effort into getting that up there, and to the point where, when it got to the stage of making the sound negative in the laboratory, they told me that they couldn't physically transfer the sound onto the camera because there was too much action going on. So I said, I'll come over. So I flew over, it was over here. I flew over and I put it on the camera myself, and I said, look, I'll sign anything to say that you don't have any liability. I just love things like we have a huge battle and then suddenly we cut and it's absolute silence, nothing else. And except Bruno walking amongst some leaves, you know, and it was using sound to a very dramatic effect. I absolutely loved that, you know. The New Zealand crew were staying in tents on the island, Illustrious Island in Fiji, whereas the cast and some of the imported crew were staying on a cruise ship offshore, you know. So it was that type of thing where I personally have always objected to any sort of discrimination. I always knew I was a good sound recordist and potentially could have worked anywhere in the world. Therefore, for me, it should have been the sound recordist, not the New Zealander, you know, in terms of rating, you know, in terms of the thing. And so I used to have lots of battles about that, you know, because I think it's important that, you know, your talent is recognised for what your talent is, not for what they think you come from, you know. It was probably really, really tough as a producer on that film because there'd been a whole run of those they were called pre-tax films made leading up to that September deadline, and the crews were all very jaded and tired, and you know, and to get there, Jeff and I had to work really hard to get the effort out of them, and we reached a point where at the end of our shooting schedule we still hadn't shot all that we sort of wanted to shoot, but we didn't really know what we wanted at that point, so we just stopped shooting. Everybody thought we were going to go over, but we didn't. We stopped shooting because we felt that whatever we needed to do, we didn't need this big crew. I've always believed in post-production as being the real big role of a producer, you know, because you can't really have that you don't have that much control during shooting. You're stuck with all sorts of things, elements, you know, cast issues, all sorts of things like that. But the reality is post-production is where you try and bring all that back together again and try and make what you really wanted to make. So, you know, Jeff and I spent a long time, for example, because everything had disappeared in the world, including insets and things, we had to redub every single line of dialogue in it. Every noise, not just the dialogue, every single effect, every sound effect, nothing from the location was ever used on that, you know. So it was, you know, it was a big job. Leon is a passionate man, you know, Leon Nabi, and Leon came to me and he said, "Oh, look, I'm really worried." And I said, "Why are you worried, Leon?" He said, "The shovel handles that these Chinamen have been using they're new. If they've been using the same shovel handle for 20 years, they're going to have worn marks on them and things, and their boots just don't look right." And suddenly it all came out that he felt that we were rushing too fast into production, and the sets weren't going to be feeling that sort of that strong sense of place, you know, so that they were actually, the sets were owned by the people as opposed to being a film set. So we talked about it, and you know, with Chris Hampson, who was my co-producer on that, we talked about it and decided to delay the shoot for a year to the following summer. And so for the rest of that year, Leon, along with the art director and the designer, spent all that time building the set. Everybody loved working on the project, and they loved working with Leon, and there was this huge sense of support. And you know, I mean, of course, there was all sorts of odd difficulties here and there, as there always is. You know, we got all the vehicles stuck in the mud one night, you know, and it took a long time to get them all out. But it was just this strong feeling that we were making Leon's film. Everybody on the shoot had this feeling, and we were all down in Clyde together. It's an interesting thing about being on location with no other, you know, without doing that sort of thing when you go and do a 3 or 4 weeks location, then you go back to a studio and shoot all the interiors. We did the whole thing there. It just makes everybody feel that they're making the film, you know, as opposed to doing a job. Vincent is an artist, you know, and he sees things in this grand pictorial scale. And really, I suppose the difficulty with that is the small details of how you get to the place where the grand scale exists, or how do you get a crew of 150 from there to there, and things, you know, sort of bypass him, you know. And so he's not that interested in the fact that he might want to shoot one shot here and then walk 300 metres down the riverbank to shoot another shot there, you know. So we all tried our best to give Vincent what he wanted, you know, and he chose the actress, and you know, there was a number of interesting candidates, but he wanted this particular type of performance and the particular type of look, and you know, in the end, that was probably a difficult thing for him, because in the end, his relationship with the actress didn't work as well as we all might have hoped. It would have been easy enough to walk away from that, you know, because there was all sorts of opportunities just to shut it down, and you know, it was finished. And I've had a lot of people who said they really loved it. You know, people can pinpoint bits and pieces about it, but you know, I think the film was finished, it was released. The fights with TVNZ about it, first of all, they only wanted to commission 26 episodes, and I said, no, it's got to be 240 or nothing, because every research tells you that a soap takes off, and then it slowly dives, and then it picks up again over a period of a year, if it works. If it doesn't pick over the year, sure, then it hasn't worked. And exactly what happened. So if we'd only done 26 episodes, they would have never commissioned more. Between Chris Bailey and I, we scavenged TVNZ for equipment and things and people, and you know, we found all this equipment that wasn't necessarily in use, and we set it all up out at Browns Bay and made the thing happen. You know, like, it was really a lot of bulldozing that pushed it through. I can put my hand on my heart and say that I had contributed a lot towards the formation of the early days of the New Zealand film industry and television industry, and that, you know, that through various aspects of my career I've been able to influence certain things that have actually allowed the industry to get where it is now, you know, which is, it's a totally different place now to what it was when I was starting out. But one of the biggest contributions I made to the industry was when I became a sound recordist in my very early days. If you were really lucky, they'd come around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and ask you if you wanted a sandwich or something, and you'd give them $2 or something to go and buy a sandwich for you. And over time, I have to say I've stopped shoots at times to say I am not recording another line at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We've been here since 7 until I get lunch. And so my biggest contribution to the industry was creating lunch breaks on time.